If we look at things now,
Absolutely. Yeah.
the most basic L1, like the most crappiest L1, number 200 in market cap, you cannot steal user funds. You cannot censor.
Yeah.
Okay, you can do that on the top 20 L2s right now. That make up like
So-
what, like 99% of the TVL. Like this is crazy.
So let me,
That's
so
the
let me address
reality
that.
right now. So I'm asking you, who's on the side of decentralization here?
You started your sort of critique on rollups generally on talking about incentives and how it doesn't make sense for a rollup to give up the position of being a sequencer.
Yeah.
If you are a rollup today, do you really think it is in your interest to steal your users' funds?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unchained, your no-hype resource for all things crypto. I'm your host, Laura Shin. Binance is the world's #1 crypto exchange, trusted by over 290 million users. With industry-leading liquidity, security, and a wide range of digital asset products, Binance is the place to buy, sell, trade, and earn crypto. Download Binance today to get started. The crypto world is buzzing. On October 1st and 2nd, 25,000 people will be at Token 2049 Singapore, the largest crypto event in the world, featuring headline speakers like Eric Trump, Vlad Tenev, Tom Lee, Balaji Srinivasan, and Arthur Hayes. Visit asia.token2049.com now to get 15% off tickets with the code UNCHAINED. I am here with Justin Bonds, founder and CIO of Cyber Capital, and Haonan Li, co-founder and CEO of Codex. Welcome, Justin and Haonan.
Pleasure to be here again. It's always love coming on to Unchained, so it's going to be great. Thank you.
Hey, Laura. Nice to see you. Nice to see you, Justin.
So you guys, we are at this moment in crypto where fintechs and crypto are clearly converging on the same space. And we are seeing that stablecoins are likely to be one of the first big on-ramps, which is why there's probably just so many stable chains that have been announced recently. Those would include, ARC, Plasma, Stable. And then the big one that really kicked off a huge discussion on Twitter was Stripe's Tempo. After that announcement, Twitter was aflame with people debating the merits of, new ventures creating their own layer ones versus building layer twos on top of Ethereum. And, that is basically why we are here today. And this also touches upon a previous discussion that was had around Robinhood Chain's choice of building a layer two on top of Ethereum. So here to discuss are Haonan, who is actually building an L2 for stablecoin payments, and Justin Bonds, who has a different view on, how it is that these types of projects should be built. But why don't we start with kind of like the general view from each of you on how it is that you think companies should make this choice? There's probably like certain cases where you think one choice is better than another. So, who do you think should build an L1? How should, a new venture think about this? Who should build an L2, et cetera? And Haonan, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think as always, the companies that are built on first principles are the ones that win. And I think I would caution against any kind of motivated reasoning to back into a set of justifications to justify building an Alt-L1 in hopes of some sort of Alt-L1 premium. I think you saw a movement shift from L2 to L1. There was like an 11% spike. It went way back down immediately. I think these types of valuation games by trying to put yourself in the right reference class of assets is old. This is an old game. That's not interesting anymore. I think the future here is thinking about what really matters and how can we actually deliver value to users. I think if you perform that first principles analysis, you will arrive at a conclusion that we have arrived at, which is the correct one. But Justin, I'm sure, has a different view.
I will partially agree with you, actually, because I think we should start with first principles. And actually, that's why I have the position that I do. And what I thought was most interesting, actually, about the Tempo announcement is the reason why they said they were not building on an L2, because they value decentralization. They want a permissionless validator set. They don't want a single admin key that can steal user funds. They don't want a single server that can censor and front-run transactions, right? So I think the decision by Tempo was one from first principles, where where from a business and competitive perspective, it makes no sense to wait for Ethereum to increase capacity when that's completely vague and there's no like clear timeline on that. While simultaneously, if the other option is building on centralized L2s, then I'm glad they're either building out their own L1 or building on another L1 that can scale for the sake of decentralization, for the sake of credible neutrality, for the sake of what this whole movement is supposed to be about and what actually makes it valuable in the first place.
So I don't want to put our viewers to sleep here, and I'm happy to debate, what stage 0, stage 1, stage 2 roll up, blah, 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 right? I think the sort of TLDR here is there's a very clear path to decentralization for rollups. And it's built on a sort of technical base that is deeply lindy. The bugs that they find in Geth these days are bugs at the Go level. That means that, look, the bug is so robust that the only bugs you can find are at the language level. Will we have the same sort of picture when it comes to this, experimental new Alt L1 that's coming up? I don't know. I'm not convinced of it. There's some smart people over there, but I think OSS and a long duration of being attacked under the most adversarial circumstances imaginable on the planet has made this code base so incredibly hard. Now, you could say that's L1. What's that got to do with L2? Well, the best L2 rollup companies are the ones that have figured out that really the key to winning this game is minimizing the diff between L2 and L1. And so, Optimism, for instance, where, I'm biased, I used to be there, has the philosophy of minimizing the diff between OP Geth and Geth. And so in a sense, you're inheriting that lindiness, the robustness of that code base. And I'm just deeply skeptical that some guy's going to one-shot this and it's going to be amazing. I'm also deeply skeptical about the neutrality arguments here. I think decentralization, neutrality sometimes get coupled together as buzzwords. If you are another fintech, do you really want to bet your business on a substrate controlled by your competitor? I just don't really find that all that credible. And we can sort of say the words, right, and chant an incantation, but I think in a boardroom somewhere, somebody's going to make the cold rational analysis, and I think it's going to come in Ethereum's favor.
You make quite a few points here, actually, and I think it is worth digging into that claim a little bit more, because you say L2s will decentralize, and I just don't see a path towards that happening, because decentralizing implies a lot of these parties giving up on their power, giving up on their revenue, and it's a rule in history for the most part that people en masse don't tend to do that. The exception to that rule is incredibly rare. So I think this audience is up to maybe us diving a bit deeper into shared sequencing, based rollups, etc. And
Justin,
maybe what kind of solutions you might have
I'm
in
on
mind.
your territory here.
Yeah, no, this is gonna be a great discussion. I'm appreciating the back and forth as well. It's productive.
You are putting me on death's ground soon. I know this is your bread and butter here. I'm happy to do some of it. I think you'll outclass me on many of the specifics. I think there's no need to sort of think about the roadmap in sort of a decade or 2 decades later, right? I think let's just examine the case now, right?
Okay,
so
agreed. Okay, let's look at it now. No, but hold on. If I may just respond to that, because you gave me quite a few things to respond to before. If we look at things now, the most basic L1, the most crappiest L1, number 200 in market cap, you cannot steal user funds. You cannot censor. Okay, you can do that on the top 20 L2s right now. That make up 99% of the TVL. This is crazy. That's the reality right now. So I'm asking you, who's on the side of decentralization here?
I'm not able to defend every L2 on the planet. Certainly there are poorly run L2s, right?
What about the vast majority of them, including all of the dominant ones? That's the ecosystem we're dealing with. Yeah,
let me make my case here for a little bit. I think look, we don't have to think about some far off future where the sequencer, it's a shared sequencing scheme that some brilliant person has thought of, and it's instead of compatible and all these wonderful things. Let's not think about that yet. Let's just think what happens at a stage 1 of decentralization for a rollup. We're talking about permissionless withdrawals, right? What does that mean? That means a user can always exit the L2 by submitting a transaction on L1. What is that? That is the right to exit. Now, Albert Hirschman talked about voice and exit as being sort of the most important checks on authority. And similarly here, even in the near term, we can have these properties that are a real check on sort of abuse at the L2 level. This is in a way that no L1 is going to be able to offer in a credible manner. And so Justin, I'm happy to do we can do the whole deep dissection of the L2 roadmap and so on and so forth. I think for me, it's just, even in the near term, you can clearly see that there are properties that are going to be a real check on abuse for L2s. And by the way, maybe I'll seed our discussion in an interesting way, because I don't want to do the whole, right. I think folks have heard that content from you, Justin, and the ETH maxis have said the L2 talking points, and I don't want to just do that again, right? I'll throw some I'll throw some controversial views in here, right? I think certainly many of the L2s today that are, in my view, set up incorrectly and targeting wrong markets are parasitic to L1. I'll say that. Now, this is not, I'm probably going to get canceled for this, right? And Justin, that's probably is that one of your views? Is that right?
Correct.
So there's some
yes,
common ground here. There's some common ground here. I think what is exciting to discuss is like, well, how does the future look like? What sort of, I would love to go that direction if you want, Justin. I'm sure there's plenty of fun out there.
No, I think the future is interesting. And I think for me, that's very much about the incentives around change. And that's why I'm skeptical that this transition can happen. But before we go there, I'd like to just respond to some of the things you said as well. I don't want to leave all of the points uncounted here. But specifically, you talk about the right to exit and having exit queues. And it's like, well, that's nice, but it's kind of just like decentralization theater, right? Because if the admin key can instantly do an emergency change to smart contract, they can still steal all user funds, and there won't be any time for users to do an exit.
Right? Typically what's contemplated is it's a security council, right? And then whatever, it's 10 folks who agree, and then yes, in that case that would be true. In stage 2, the security council will not even be able to freeze withdrawals, right? In stage 2, a smart contract has to detect a bug, and then
but we agreed to talk about what exists now, right? And we're not at stage 2. We're talking about stage 1.
I think
right?
Look, it's going to be a progressive process, right? And I think certainly you can have critiques about stage 1 roll-ups. I think if an intellectually honest critique would also apply similar logic to how big are these validator sets for these alt L1s really? How do they compare to the security council sizes? So look, I think a lot of this is not that interesting.
Hold on. If we just use Solana as an example, okay, Solana's got about, I think, around 1,400 validators compared to, say, Ethereum's 5,000. Right. I would estimate around 5,000.
Great.
Like that is a lot more than just like 5 people or 10 people chosen as part of a permission, like admin key. Like I don't think it's fair to conflate those two things.
By stage 2, you'll be happy. By stage 2, you'll be happy, right? By stage 2, look, 30-day delays before you can do any upgrades. You can't pause withdrawals.
But now we're back to future promises, right? We're not talking about what exists now.
Well,
so I think
I have a question. So what do you feel like is keeping these L2s from moving to stage 2 just yet? Like, how much longer do you think it would be? Do you feel like it's something that needs more years, or is it like a timeline of months? Like, what would you say needs to happen?
I think what needs to happen is people are. I think the biggest problem in roll-up land traditionally, and I think Justin will agree with me here, is that people have approached these kind of generalized roll-ups. Do you know what I mean? Where you do a roll-up and what's the difference between this roll-up and L1? Well, the gas prices are cheaper, and they're going to try to do NFTs and gaming and DeFi and something about payments and 12 other things. And I think historically that is really the approach that has failed, because in a sense I think it is parasitic, right? Like what is it that you are adding to L1 other than your batch submission fees? And traditionally, pre 4844, perhaps you could say that is a set of economics that matter. Post 4844, there's no way you can argue that this is, an interesting economic accrual. So I think the future here needs to be
just for the audience, referring to blobs here, right?
Yes. Shout out to Proto Lambda, my former colleague.
Not everyone knows the code numbers or whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's the jargon.
Yes.
I mean, that's why I want to get away from the boring stuff, right? But I think what really matters is roll-ups should be focused on industry-specific things, very narrow focuses, these strict verticals. For us, it's stablecoins, right? And so what is the value add there? The value add is we are able to focus on this in specific use case obsessively. I wake up, I think about stablecoins. I eat lunch, I think about stablecoins. I'm, in the toilet, I'm thinking about stablecoins. We're on the ground, talking to people. We were in Malaysia talking to people. These are things that means that we can run a full product iteration loop very, very quickly and focus on one specific industry vertical, which, assuming we are not idiots, should give us an enormous edge when it comes to building things that are actually useful for people, building things that can actually extend the usefulness of stablecoins and broaden the appeal of these systems. And so then what is our obligation then? Our obligation then as an Ethereum L2, I think, is to return real economics to L1. And, there's various schemes to do that. But that's kind of how I see this future going. Highly specialized rollups that really accrue value to Ethereum L1.
So why don't we, obviously we went into all different kinds of issues there that I was going to ask specific questions about later on. So why don't we actually just take this moment to have Haonan kind of explain, you are building Codex. This is this L2 specifically for stablecoins for businesses, and it's obviously on top of Ethereum. So why did you, decide that was the optimal structure for your project?
Yeah, I think first observation is that most of the stablecoins are on Ethereum. And this one doesn't have a EIP number, right? So maybe sounds less like, highbrow, but I think that brute fact is extremely important. And I think that's driven by a structural BD edge that the Ethereum community has over everybody else. Ethereum historically does not do BD. Like, you guys know this, right? Like, who is there to call? There's nobody to call until very recently, led by, leaders like Vivek Raman and Ash and others at the Ethereum Foundation. There's now, some BD motion. Now, the reason why Ethereum has had so much adoption, even though until very recently there wasn't even a BD team, is because of the enormous credibility and neutrality that Ethereum has. When somebody thinks crypto, first thought maybe Bitcoin, right? But look, you can't do some stuff on Bitcoin. Like, where do you go next? You go Ethereum, for sure. Justin, your Solana bags aside, come on, right? Like, the first name that comes to mind is definitely Ethereum.
The adoption of Solana has massively outstripped Ethereum over the recent years, right? To be fair. And I think that's a consequence of the L1 not scaling.
I think Solana is wonderful. I think there's lots of really smart people there, and I think fantastic things have happened.
But that's only possible due to Ethereum's failure, from my perspective. Otherwise, Ethereum would still just have the dominant position right now, when now most metrics are now in Solana's favor, right?
Well, I mean, here's one metric, right? Like, I'm a stablecoin guy, so I look at the stablecoin metrics.
Sure.
So
Stablecoin TVL is on Ethereum side. Everything else is on Solana side right now, metric-wise, for the most part.
Well, I mean, Justin, let me finish, right? So yeah, I think, look, there's $160 billion of stablecoins on Ethereum, and there's 10 billion on Solana. That's an order of magnitude. So yeah, I don't think there's much of conversation here.
I would say 10 billion worth of stable coins that can actually serve as money and can actually be used for commerce in a permissionless way, I actually think is more valuable than 100 billion in either an unscalable system that is actually kind of pointless and useless because people can't actually use it, or locked up in L2s that are, centralized and, funds can be stolen and it's not censorship resistant. Yeah,
Well,
I would say
wait,
that
but
10 billion is more
Justin,
valuable.
I mean,
Yeah.
don't you see that, DeFi on Ethereum is much bigger? Like, it seems like you feel like
Sure, but it's very much a legacy of its past, right? Like, a lot of the TVL on Ethereum is very static and unoptimized. So you have this old system that's kind of riding on its laurels while the competitor comes along, is outpacing it in almost all adoption metrics. So yeah, I think Ethereum has been steadily losing.
If you begin with the premise that Solana is wonderful and you need to say some things to make Solana sound wonderful, like, there are many ways to do it, and I think you're doing an excellent job of that. I think though, but come on, look at the numbers, man. Like, one is 10x the other. Like, it shouldn't.
You're focusing on a single number, like revenue. Both protocol revenue and application revenue on Solana is higher. I would actually argue that's more important. But I've noticed that once TVL and stablecoins was the only metric left on Ethereum, it became the most important metric. But I mean, that's okay.
I mean, look, Justin, I'm a
we can have a
stablecoin
different
guy,
opinion
right?
on that. Of course,
I'm a stablecoin guy. I was asked why build on Ethereum. I think, for me at least, for my narrow domain, and again, I eat, drink, shit, stablecoins, right? So I only do this, and for me, the choice is very clear. And for me,
I think
But
there's a
okay,
set
but
of
Haonan,
attributes.
like
Yeah.
I do want to ask, because so we have seen the metrics from Solana that on the usage sides, like especially kind of more like user adoption apps like UX, those types of things. Those metrics are at least on the upswing on Solana. So at this moment in time, like it's definitely one of those things where, yeah, okay, clearly Ethereum was the leader in so many ways for a long time, and now they have a credible competitor. And you were launching at this moment in time where there's this clear competition between the two. Like, why did you decide to throw in your lot with the more established chain, even though its future is a little bit more in question than it has been in the past?
I think again, like I think the first principle analysis bears it out that Ethereum is the better bet. I think if I'm truthful about this, there's probably a social angle to this as well, where like a lot of my friends are in Ethereum and so on and so forth, right? But I think the first principles analysis alone justifies this very clearly to me. And
It doesn't make, but this analysis, if we actually have this debate,
let me offer the analysis.
and then I'll
let's
counter.
not do the usual. Sorry, what's that?
And then I'll counter the analysis. Let's
Oh,
go.
absolutely. I expect it. I mean, yeah, 100%. So look, I think this BD point is really underappreciated. So most of the adoption on Ethereum is there, not because there's somebody from the EF picking up the phone going like, yo, use my chain. That motion historically does not exist, right? The stuff on Ethereum is because people are like, my God, like I want to do something in crypto. What's the most neutral, best place to do it? Everybody's first instinct is Ethereum. Now, what happens when you have a L2 that's focused only on stablecoins, that also is working with Ethereum folks to really capitalize and to really listen to customers and really engage with customers in a way that previously is very, very difficult to do at the L1 level? I think that's like a very underappreciated piece of this, and a big part of the story. Justin, you're smiling, which has me worried.
Right. Okay. So I mean, again, back to first principles. From my perspective, if you're a user, if you're a cryptocurrency user, and you're deciding what product to use, you can use the Ethereum L1, which is slow and expensive, right? So that doesn't really make sense, right? It doesn't even have the capacity for mass adoption, right? It's just impossible. Or you could use an Ethereum L2, which means there's an admin key, which can still use the funds, which means they can censor.
Let's not go back to stage 1, stage 2.
No,
right?
like, but this is important. But this is important. But hold on. No. This is important. Today, if first principle matters, you can choose between an unscalable system that's expensive and doesn't work, right? Or you can choose between a centralized system that can still use the funds, can censor, etc. Or you can choose to use a cheap, fast, permissionless, and decentralized system. When we say first principles matter, and you're actually analyzing it from the perspective of a user, of course they'll use an alternative L1 if they actually care about decentralization.
Why
of course
then
they will.
Why then are there more than 10x more billion stablecoins on Ethereum than there are on Solana?
Because people deployed more stablecoins over there. Like you're focusing on this single metric, and I already told you it's not the most important metric to me.
I'm the stablecoin guy.
That's fine.
I'm a stablecoin guy, right?
Okay, the majority of stablecoins are on Ethereum. Okay, I can see.
I don't think you can offer this like theoretical, logical analysis that you think is airtight, and then I give you a piece of empirical evidence, and you go,
you're cherry picking. You're cherry picking a single metric. I mean, if you want to talk metrics, okay, sure. Ethereum. I mean, this is also not really a counter argument, right, to what I'm saying, because what I'm saying is from a user's perspective. This is the choice.
I think what you're saying is interesting. I think what you're saying, you kind of like you apply these adjectives that are like not really intellectually honest, right? You're like,
hold on, stop. If you're going to call me not intellectually honest, what did I say that was not honest? If you're going to start from ad hominem,
going there.
Go ahead. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I don't mean to ad hominem here. I think like I'm just characterizing. I could.
What did I say that was dishonest?
I think. Look, like the way you described Ethereum, you describe it as if it's like this. Terrible experience, and you describe Solana as this like glittering.
I didn't say terrible experience
on a hill.
I did a
it's like, come on,
description.
like these are not. And then
these were factual statements. Factual,
described these
just
rollups.
factual statements without even rhetoric. If you play this back, you'll see what I
Well,
just did there.
Well,
Okay, so then you talk about rollups in a way, you started your sort of critique on rollups generally on talking about, incentives and how it doesn't make sense for a rollup to give up the position of being a sequencer.
Yeah.
If you are a rollup today, do you really think it is in your interest to steal your users' funds? You think like Arbitrum over there is going to like decide,
Are
hey
you going
guys,
to
like
defend admin keys?
Steven
Is
Goldfeder,
hold on. Are
Steven
you here
Goldfeder needs a
defending
new
admin
Ferrari.
keys? Is this now going to be the
Let's
debate?
just steal all the funds.
I mean, fine.
No,
If you want
it's
to have
not,
that
but
debate,
like,
we can.
it's just like, look, like I've
What are you
laid out for
saying?
you. Well, no, I'm making the case that, look, I've laid out for you that there is a progressive roadmap to decentralization.
Okay.
And sure, it is a progressive one, but I can point to you very clearly at which point what technical assumptions, what assurances can be given.
Okay.
These
Can
are
you
good
just simply
assurances.
concede? Can you just today for a user they have a more decentralized, more secure, better experience on something like Solana?
Can you
with Ethereum,
concede
right?
that
You can
today
concede that.
Solana is a more than 10x worse place for stablecoins than Ethereum?
Yes, I concede
given the
that. Can you
empirical
concede the other point, and then we can both do a little concede thing here? I think that's
What is it you want me to concede, Justin? I don't want to.
Yeah, this is good. This is good. This is good.
What is it you want me to
concede
concede?
that today for a user, if they want to seek out the best user experience from the perspective of decentralization, security, and fees and speed, that they're better off on Solana than they are on an Ethereum L2 or Ethereum itself.
I think if you are a stablecoin user, the best place for you is Codex. That's what I think.
Yeah,
I think. Look, I think
that's not an honest answer. Now who's being intellectually dishonest? Now who's being intellectually dishonest? Everyone can see through this.
So, okay, so why don't we? So, Haonan, go ahead and back that up. Make your case. We want to hear how you're coming to that conclusion.
Yeah. So, like, I think some of this decentralization talk is maybe besides the point, and I think what we are focused on is certainly those properties, and certainly we're committed to that roadmap of progressive decentralization. I think today, what matters for users when it comes to stablecoins is that they function and work the way that Chamath Palihapitiya believes they work. What I mean by that is the buzzword of stablecoins is that, look, like all this shit is seamless, everything's super fucking smooth, like really low cost. It all just works great. Like Circle stocks at 40x revenue, everything's fucking amazing. If you're on the ground, I think you see all of the frictions and problems of stablecoins today. And most of them are at the boundary between on-chain and off-chain. And so what we're focused on today as a first order priority is to eliminate that boundary between off-chain and on-chain. And so our first product, Avenue, is a stablecoin liquidity hub that offers wholesale pricing between different types of stablecoins and between different types of fiat and stablecoins globally. And so what we want to build long term is that a stablecoin chain with this property, that any fiat that comes in can convert into a stablecoin so seamlessly and so painlessly. It's the way Chamath imagines it in his head. And stablecoins can move around in this really wonderful and efficient way. Over time, we need to layer on other assumptions, other technical properties like atomic off-ramps. Basically, when stablecoins get sent into exchanges today, sometimes they get stuck because they run the KYB checks after the money arrives. Why can't the KYB checks be run before? And if the KYB checks fail, why can't the transaction revert on the spot so the user's never stuck? Anyway, this is why I spend most of my time thinking about.
Crazy idea. How about we just scale the L1 and then we get rid of all of this crazy complexity and trust trade-offs?
Binance is the world's #1 crypto exchange, trusted by over 290 million users globally. With world-class liquidity, security, and a wide portfolio of digital asset products, Binance makes crypto easy for everyone. Whether you're new to crypto or a professional, Binance offers a simple user experience. Learn with Binance Academy, browse hundreds of tokens, and track your portfolio on an easy-to-use dashboard. For experienced users, Binance Pro provides industry-leading services and bespoke trading products. With some of the lowest fees and deepest liquidity in the market, it's no wonder over 290 million users choose Binance for everything crypto. Buy, sell, trade, earn, live crypto. Download Binance today and begin your journey into the future of finance. Disclaimer: Binance is not available in certain countries, including the US. Check its terms for more information. Binance.com/en/terms. Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Tom Lee, Vlad Tenev, Paolo Ardoino, Balji Srinivasan, Arthur Hayes. These are just some of the headliners at Token 2049 Singapore, the largest crypto event in the world. happening October 1st and 2nd. Over 25,000 attendees, 500 exhibitors, and 300 speakers will converge for an unmissable week. Token 2049 will take over all 5 floors of Marina Bay's Sands, transforming it into a pop-up city with 1,000 side events, nonstop networking, and immersive experiences, all leading into the Formula One Grand Prix weekend. Ticket prices are rising this week. Visit asia.token2049.com and use code UNCHAINED for 15% off tickets. Well, okay, you guys, I want to actually just take this moment to talk about the tempo thing, because Justin's actually seemingly arguing more like pro Solana, but what we have been seeing is obviously they're going to be building new alt L1s. If we look at kind of how Matt Huang described, their reasoning, he said they didn't want to be beholden to the tech specs of being an Ethereum L2. Fast finality obviously was an example. And, for finality from Ethereum, that's like 12 to 13 minutes. He said also they wanted multiple validators rather than a single sequencer. They're going to be creating what he called custom transaction lanes and custom gas pricing. So those are, some of the different things. What did you think about their reasoning? And, let's leave aside this issue about the neutrality thing, because we can discuss that later, but let's just focus on the tech specs.
I actually applaud their decision. I think it's great. I mean, personally, I would have built on maybe a pre-existing L1. I think that's generally the better. Look, and I'm a pluralist when it comes to crypto, right? I'm not a maxi of any sort. There's many good blockchains out there, so I don't want to make this a Ethereum versus Solana debate. That's not what I'm here to do. But I can talk about the Stripe, and I think what they're doing there, I think, is really interesting. And I particularly thought that it was quite the condemnation, actually, of Ethereum's L2 scaling roadmap, and it's the first kind of sign, I think, of a company also really appreciating and valuing decentralization and permissionlessness. And I think that is something we should applaud, because I think this whole idea that like, I think I like to draw the analogy with like the early internet, where in the early internet, there were these things called intranets that were like these private internet for companies, let's say, because these companies just weren't comfortable using a public internet that everyone could connect to. That sounded very scary to them, rightfully so, actually. But actually, over time, these companies started deploying more on the internet directly and started to get more comfortable with the idea of a public network that is permissionless, that everyone can access. And I see a similar pattern and a kind of journey of understanding that's happening with a lot of these institutionals as well, where at first they're like, "Ooh, this is scary. I want to control everything. It should be centralized. It should be in the way that I understand things." But generally, they'll start to embrace decentralized systems and permissionless systems, because that's really where the value is. That's where the value add is. Because if the system is not,
Justin, like, it's interesting to me that you're saying, they're heading in that direction, which is actually what Haonan is saying about the L2s. So, you're not okay with
Stripe is actually doing it, and L2s are just saying it, right?
Wait, but what do you mean by that?
Well, there's no change, Justin.
Yeah, Stripe. Tempo is literally starting with a permissioned validator set.
I mean, you're asking me. Oh, sorry, it was a permissionless validator set.
It's starting with a permissioned validator set. They will move to permissionless.
Okay.
And so it's not permissionless from the get-go. And
I mean, you're asking me to comment on a blockchain based on just like a 2,000 word article or something, right? So I don't really have much to go by.
I know. Well, none of us.
I'm just running with it.
We're just going with what they said.
I mean, generally, the way that I'm seeing it is, generally speaking, look, if it's permission, then I'm going to say this is bad. I'm going to be consistent here. I think they should use a permissionless validator set. I think that's what crypto is all about. So
right, but they're saying that they will move to that. Mm-hmm. And so they have this like roadmap to get more decentralized. Mm-hmm. And Haonan is saying that the L2s have a roadmap to become more decentralized. So why is it not okay for Ethereum L2s to be working toward the decentralization, but it is okay for...
It's not okay for both, honestly. It's not okay for L2s to say, we will promise decentralization in the future, and it's not okay for Stripe to say, we will promise decentralization in the future, because we have decentralized options now. We always have, right?
Well, okay, but one question, which is... the history of literally every blockchain, including Bitcoin, is that it started centralized. We all know that the first however many blocks of the Bitcoin blockchain, there's only like 2 or 3 people mining it. So, this is kind of just how a lot of these
No,
blockchains
I
start to
understand
what?
that, but like
Okay.
there's a difference here, right? When something is small and just starts out, you're right. Every blockchain starts out centralized. I like saying that as well because it's 100% correct. And then you have this gradual process of decentralization. But we're talking about networks that are worth tens of billions of dollars that have been around for 4+ years. I don't think you can keep using that excuse. I'm just going to call out incompetence and just them not actually caring about those principles and putting them first. Even worse, this is actually a case of perverse incentives. It's not a coincidence that the top 20 L2s are all centralized. It's not a coincidence. They're just following their incentives. And that's the same reason why these systems won't decentralize as well. Of course, Base is not going to decentralize. Of course, they're not going to give up on 100 million plus of revenue in the process. It's nonsense. And it's also, that's why Ethereum's in such a messed up situation right now, because if it did actually scale, you would put half of the Ethereum ecosystem out of business because Optimism would go broke, Base would go broke, it would all just go bankrupt. That's why there's such a strong incentive to actually never scale the system.
I mean, Justin, Optimus will never go broke because, Andreessen's there. So, but, like, I think I hear you on all of that. I think we can do another round of that if we want. But I think you said something else that's really interesting, which is the corpo networks. You said, look, the sort of prehistory of the internet is that you had all these companies who decided, look at this shitty open internet thing, right? It's kind of shitty. It's got these problems, kind of chaotic. Let me make my own one, right? Bill Gates called this the information highway. And he had a
But
book
they
where
didn't
he
become,
wrote a
but
lot
they
about
didn't
this.
become the internet of the future, right?
I guess that's where I'm going, right? I think like that. I think that's what you're seeing in stablecoin land today. Again, I'm a stablecoin guy, right? So, you've got Stripe, you got Circle, you got other players who are looking at something like Ethereum and going, well, my God, like we ought to have the information highway for stablecoins, and they're thinking the same way that Bill Gates thought back in the day. Now, what happened to Gates here? So Gates wrote these ideas in a book. And that was the first edition of the book. By the time the second edition came out, he was conclusively proven wrong. And so, they had to pulp a bunch of these books and edit the language such that Bill had always thought that it would be this open internet concept. I mean, Bill aside, like, what is the point here? The point is that open systems win, neutral systems win. Why is it that the open internet won over like Microsoft's like information highway? Well, if you're somebody building, like, which one would you rather build on? Where do you think your property rights are more secure? Where do you think, like, neutrality actually means something? It's not just
And
a
that is why
buzzword, right?
fragmenting the Ethereum ecosystem was such a big mistake, because now it's no longer unified.
I think the future of rollups must add value to L1. The rollups that add value to L1 and the ones that are able to play in this new paradigm are the ones that are going to be extremely, extremely successful.
The way that I see
the
it,
path forward is focus.
Say when Base pays, say, $1 out of the $200, it makes back to the L1, right? So only a fraction of the usage goes back to the L1. If I compare that to a system that actually scales while preserving decentralization, right? Like, that means all of those fees goes back to the L1. So if you project that out in the long run, if you take all of the fees that would go to L2s and now going back to the L1, right? If you project that out, in the long run, the blockchain that scales the L1 will have a greater security budget. It will become the more secure. It will become the more decentralized blockchain. So Ethereum is really setting itself up for a powerful failure economically here, because it's outsourcing execution to private L2s, and it's only getting a fraction of those fees back, while competitors are able to maintain a single composable state and keep all of the fees to themselves, which are then utilized for improving decentralization and scarcity over the long run. That's what makes these other systems superior, including from the decentralization, credible neutrality perspective. If you project things out, if we start talking about the future, which you do keep bringing it back to that, and I'm happy to have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, so let's do one thing, because we started with neutrality, and then you kind of said, like, you brought up the scaling issues, the parasitic issue about the L2. So let's kind of put a bow on the neutrality thing and like finish that up, and then we'll move to these other descriptions, because I just wanted to ask you, so Justin, like, obviously we were talking about tempo, like, you keep mentioning a Solana, or it doesn't have to be Solana, but any L1 that is, capturing all the fees, and we'll use that to scale. But, Tempo, they are claiming that they are going to become a neutral platform with respect to stablecoins. And I even heard like Zach Abrams on Bridge on Bankless calling Stripe a major contributor, which, he works there now. And I don't know how many people who are outside of Stripe would consider them a major contributor to Tempo versus, I think people think Tempo is Stripe's blockchain. So, I saw Anthony Sassano tweeted at Matt Huang, how is Tempo going to be neutral when it's backed by Stripe? Why would Stripe allow competitors to use their chain to grow? So let's just talk about that. Like, how do you think they get over, like in this period when they're not decentralized yet, how do they get people on board and using their chain at this time when they are much more in control of that chain than they would be in a truly decentralized system?
If they choose to decentralize in the future, so you actually apply a permissionless validator set and where anyone can join, then the problem takes care of itself, right? As long as this token itself is sufficiently distributed. I mean, that's the whole point. Like a private corporation can launch a blockchain and profit off it, and then the system becomes decentralized and eventually comes out of their hand. I would also say it would be good if they implement stakeholder governance. I'm a big fan of on-chain governance. That's something that Ethereum lacks. I think that's a big problem. It's not the subject for today's debate, but I think if they add something like stakeholder governance, they have a sufficiently distributed token, they make it truly permissionless and truly like think about how making the system more decentralized. A lot of ifs there, granted, but then the problem takes care of itself. Like it's okay that private corporations launch new L1s and compete in the free market. That's how we create solution if some of the dominant blockchains are failing us. And I think that's a great thing.
I think the smart move for Stripe will be to to act as neutrally as possible for as long as possible. Try to get all the flows on the chain, and then by then it's too late. Then they capture everything.
I actually agree with you, and that's why I see a similar path to L2s. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a difference, right? Like we're not Stripe. We're not Stripe. We don't have a payments business as well. I think the reaction you're seeing in the market, when you talk to payment service providers and other folks, other fintechs, is people are a little wary of this for good reason, right? I don't think the team is like malicious or evil or anything like that. I think it's just that it gives people pause. Like, should I really be on a substrate that is fundamentally kind of
But hold on,
not in my interest to be on?
It feels a bit like you're sowing doubt here because like we can verify ourselves if a system is permissionless and decentralized. We can just check, we can look at the code, we can analyze the network. So it's like,
I think maybe you're fixating on the
certainty around design,
I think maybe you're fixating on like some of those nouns. I think like end of the day, if you are a competing fintech, do you really want to build the future of your business on a substrate that is adversarial to you? I think the answer is no. And I think, by the way, I didn't cherry pick this example. You found the history example, right? You said corpo internets and sort of the prehistory of the internet. It's the exact same thing. The analogy fits perfectly. You've got these companies who, obviously everybody wants to own this layer, right? It's incredibly valuable. They think the existing open neutral version kind of sucks, and they think they can do better things.
Hold on,
will really override most of these judgments.
You're missing the moral of the story.
Let me finish this point. What really is going to be the deciding factor is where do people feel like they have more secure property rights? Where do people feel like they can leave assets and feel safe? And I think the market test here is very clear, and Ethereum is clearly winning on that front. Justin, please go ahead.
Yeah, there's just saying Ethereum is winning is not exactly an argument, but it's sorry.
Well, it was prefaced by evidence. So
I mean,
maybe
honestly, if I were to
your thumb cut off,
like the way that I'm looking at this, I feel like to my mind, what Haonan is saying makes sense in the long term, but I feel like at this moment in time, we are probably going to see all these like corporate chains that are going to not only launch, but like flourish from some time. Like if we look back at AOL, that's probably the main example from that era. But yeah, is AOL used today? It's like when you see somebody using an AOL email address, don't you kind of like give it a side eye? Like you're like, what? So I feel like, your argument makes sense, but the question is really, will Codex survive that period when the intranets, the crypto equivalent of the intranets, will be dominant? That, to my mind, is
well, but it's also somewhat missing the point of the moral of this historical story, right? Because the internets didn't win. It's the internet that won. It was these private companies that were actually wrong about the future of the internet, and that it wasn't all about creating these silos, fragmented, permissioned, centralized private internets, that the future was actually in a permissionless, single, cohesive internet. And that's why this analogy, this historical example,
sorry,
actually
Justin,
serves to support this idea around having a scalable, decentralized L1 as opposed to centralized L2s, right?
Well, but so Justin,
I
in
don't
your
follow.
world, are you saying that you think stable coins should just live on Solana? Because payments, that's just a different ball game,
Stable coins will naturally gravitate towards the best product. And I'm arguing that if a blockchain is faster,
interesting claim.
Justin, how do you process payments that are, payments that's a very high throughput type of product? So how do you do that at the same time, that a Trump meme coin is launching on Solana on the same chain?
Well, Solana has local fee markets, right? So that helps deal with that problem.
Well, Justin, I think what you said earlier was really interesting. You said, the stable coins will go where the best product is. That's what you said.
100%.
$160 billion of it's on Ethereum, right? So I don't know what to say to you. I think the evidence is quite clear.
It was higher during the last bull run. This is a legacy of Ethereum's past, right? And if you actually look at where the growth is happening, it's not where Ethereum is, right?
Have you seen the growth charts recently?
Out into the future.
Justin,
if you project things out into the growth charts recently? Of course I have. And there's been more activity on Ethereum, granted. But the point is,
again,
this goes back to my
away all these facts,
I don't think that a centralized, but I don't think that a centralized system is not a superior system. That's not first principle, right?
Justin, do you know who Marco Rubio is in the U.S.? There was a presidential debate where he just kept doing these talking points he prepped. I feel like you're doing that a little bit, where you've got this set of talking points against various characters in crypto. And I mean, look, I don't think you can brush aside the evidence here. There's 10x more of it there. And I think that's very difficult to hear about. I've
conceded this so many times that yes, Ethereum currently has more stablecoin activity. It's more dominant in regards to stablecoin right now. But I'm saying that the competitors will outcompete it in the long run because of the fundamentals that I'm seeing. And the fundamentals that I'm seeing is that a fast, cheap, permissionless, and decentralized system is better than a fast, cheap, centralized system. Okay, very simple argument, one that you're unable to concede when it's just the pure fact of the matter. Can you just concede that simple point?
What is the point you want me to concede?
That a centralized, a fast and cheap system is worse than a decentralized fast and cheap system, right?
Of course, I concede that.
Okay,
of course, I concede that. I think where you lose me,
and when users have to choose today, that's currently the case for L2 scaling. Concede, right?
Justin,
can you concede that?
Justin, where you lose me is when you talk about the prehistory of the internet, and somehow you cast Ethereum as Bill Gates, when clearly Bill Gates here is Stripe, right?
I'm not.
Who is the analogy for the open web? It's clearly Ethereum. This is, again, until recently, they don't even have a BD team.
No. You're confusing the analogy. Very clearly. We're talking about L2 versus L1. We're talking about a bespoke, centralized
Laura's asking you about
public systems, right? You're confusing the argument here. That's not correct.
Laura asked you about Tempo and your views on Tempo, and how it compares to the other sort of incumbents in the space. And
I mean, I wouldn't
would you cast Tempo?
I mean, I just think no, of course not. I would wait until it becomes more mature. I would wait until it fully does its permissionless validator set. But I applaud the company for not wanting to build a centralized system, for actually wanting to have a viable path towards decentralization instead of just saying, trust me, bro. Because that's what Ethereum's all about right now. It's trust me, bro, we'll decentralize in the future. And in my over decade of cryptocurrency experience, of being a researcher, that's a very bad idea to trust. I think
Justin, we did this stage 1, stage 2. We did all this, right? I don't know if the viewers want to hear all of it.
Let's talk about a different.
If you want, but
I just need Laura, maybe just assert one thing so that folks aren't upset at me. we categorically reject that there is not a path to decentralization when it comes to L2s.
Let's
And I think, Justin, you see it differently.
Yeah, but this is
You see
key to the
it
argument.
differently, and I
Let's
think
get into it.
I think we should move on. I think we should move on because
You don't want to talk about it? I mean, let's
I'm happy to talk about it. I went through all the stages with you.
we haven't
at
actually
each
talked
stage,
about
what are
sequences.
exactly
we haven't
the
talked about base
assumptions.
rollups. We can talk about these things if you want. We haven't actually talked about it, right? You just
I just think,
claim that it will decentralize. Trust me, bro.
Okay,
right?
go ahead. We go ahead and lay out your kind of view on how that will happen, Haonan, and why it hasn't. And then Justin, you can respond. But then I really want to move on to some of the other issues, like the finality issue, fragmentation, privacy. There's a bunch. So go ahead. But just Haonan can start, and then Justin responds, and then we're going to move on.
We can make it a quick back and forth if you prefer. Up to you.
I think it's just really boring for a viewer.
No, because your whole argument rests on this claim.
No. I don't think it's boring. Go ahead. People are interested in decentralization, I think. So go ahead.
I think there's a very clear path, right? I think, again, like in stage one already, there are certain properties that are extremely useful, right? We're talking about the right to exit, and the right to exit is a key check on the behavior of the L2.
Before, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and in stage two, look, like you got like 30-day delays before doing any kind of upgrade. You can't pause withdrawals. Smart contract has to detect a bug, then it pauses deposits and withdrawals. Security Council can only resume withdrawals, right? They can't freeze it themselves. I mean, I don't know, like that's pretty good. I think at that point we're pretty good, right?
You're basically arguing admin keys are good? That's what I'm hearing right now.
No, I don't think I said that. I think I categorically
security
didn't say that.
councils are good. It's right.
Well,
and
no,
security
I
councils
said,
are just a way to protect.
I was describing, Justin. I was describing to you the properties of the system at different stages of decentralization, and the guarantees that they offer.
Okay, can I explain why I don't think that will happen? So take base.
You're going to say that the rollups, they're incentives, it's against them.
Base would have to sacrifice all of their revenue, right, in order to like truly decentralize, right? Like, do you really think that Base will do that?
I'm not sure that's the case. Justin, I'm not sure.
How is it decentralized if Base is taking a cut? Are you serious right now?
Yeah, I mean, probably the phrasing, like all of it, is so.
I mean, you would need a decentralized set of sequences, maybe, or its own validator set. Like that's how you'd achieve like a real form of decentralization. I mean, they're not going to burn the admin key, right? So therefore you need some sort of consensus in order to still be able to allow for upgrades. That's part of the dilemma that you have with L2s.
I think, when these code bases are hardened and when the product features are solid, burn the admin key. There's no need for the admin key anymore. But in the interim, you must be pragmatic and make sure that we do use things that are useful for users.
That is kind of insane. That doesn't work, right? Cryptography keeps evolving. Quantum is 10 years away. Saying just burn the admin key. There's a reason why no single L2 has done that. Why don't L2s just do that if you say that? It's nonsense. Incentives don't line up for that. And reality doesn't line up with that.
I think Laura was pointing out the hypocrisy of this, right? You're describing, you were talking about tempo, and of course it's a progressive thing. I mean, think about us as a company.
Actually,
Codex
to add on that point, Justin, a lot of the criticisms that you're making of the L2s used to be levied by Ethereum people against Solana. So it's kind of funny. There's were you criticizing Solana back in the day when they were much more centralized?
I was actually one of Solana's biggest critics back in the day.
Okay. So you do understand that there's an evolutionary process that a lot of these chains go through.
And the way we predict that evolutionary process is by looking at incentives. And if you're looking at a mass system and the incentives are perverse, then I'll predict that it won't decentralize. And that's exactly what's happening with Ethereum today. We're 4 years in.
Just
top 20 L2s are all centralized.
I've given you my view on how I think the rollup ecosystem should evolve.
Okay.
I mean, I think
we're going to move on because I don't want to miss these other topics. So let's go on to this finality issue, because I do think that this is important for payments. As we mentioned, if you're a stablecoin L2 on Ethereum, then finality takes 12 or 13 minutes. So it's especially in your case where you are targeting businesses, I'm sure you get questions about that. Like, how is that? Why do you feel like being an Ethereum L2, given that fact, is still, the best product that you can offer to your customers?
I think it's not a first order problem we encounter today when it comes to our users. I think the first order problem we encounter when we speak to our users is that stablecoins are offering a markedly better experience for them than whatever they're using currently. So whether or not the finality is this or that, it is sort of a second order thing. I think
But then what
most
about,
important.
you can't, so you are operating what is essentially going to be a kind of app chain on Ethereum, and your ability to offer certain technical benefits to your customers is going to be limited by Ethereum's roadmap. So how do you account for that as well?
I think first of all, there's a concentrated effort in Ethereum to solve some of these finality issues. I think we see a great deal of progress there. I think some of this finality stuff is a bit overblown. And certainly an L2 offers instant confirmation. It offers a kind of game theoretic finality immediately. And for many users, that is sufficient. So, some of this talk about, finality, it to me seems like some ex post reasoning about how to justify building an L2 L1. Candidly, that would be my view. Now, there are, of course, cases where finality does matter. I think, if you're bridging stablecoins from one chain to another, and folks have to underwrite the risk of things being not quite completely final, of course that matters. Now, that can be smoothed over in a number of different ways, right? One way is capital. And so, again, I think the whole category of these issues is not a first order issue. I think if you put a team together and you said, how can we make stablecoins more useful for as many people as possible? This would be on the list, but it certainly wouldn't be at the top. Yeah, that's kind of how we think about it.
That type of finality is completely unworkable as far as I'm concerned. I think the most recent example that I thought was really interesting was Hype and CLOBs. And I think that's shown us that there's a massive demand actually for large, fast central order books. And that's only possible if you have extremely fast finality, like what some of the fourth and fifth generation blockchains are now achieving. So I think if you don't have that type of finality, the idea of a central limit order book ever being competitive on an L2 is just doesn't really make sense, right? So I think that's really a deal breaker for what is currently the number one use case in terms of revenue.
Well,
I'm happy to move on from there.
Yeah, let's move on, because I think the fragmentation issue is another big one. Just because at the beginning of the show I mentioned like Arc and Tempo and Plasma and Stable, and it's just like, and now there's Codex. So how do you think that it's possible for us to prevent fragmentation? This just creates so much hassle for users. There's a lot of money and time spent on swapping stables, and it creates even like risk, right? So talk a little bit about how you feel like that can be resolved.
First of all, Codex is actually the only stablecoin chain on Ethereum. So with respect to the Ethereum ecosystem, there's no fragmentation whatsoever. Now, certainly there are many chains across other things, right? And of course,
I see what you did there. I respect it.
Justin, I got to do my job. Yeah. So certainly there is fragmentation across these chains. There's Plasmas, Arc, so on and so forth. And I think if you peel under the first layer of underneath the buzzword, you'll actually see that these guys are pursuing very, very different strategies. I won't name names, but one is sort of bundling a chain with a neobank app, right? Another is basically running a kind of bearer chain playbook, but skinned as a stablecoin thing. We are focused on these like real payment flows on the ground and like dealing with the banking, the licensing, and doing all this gunk and making sure stablecoins are more useful. And so, like, candidly, when we go to market, we don't bump up against the other stablecoin chains at all. We're doing totally different things. Now, of course, on a VC deck or something, and somebody's got stablecoin chains, you're going to see four logos, and they look side by side and they do the same thing, but not really. They really don't. And so, like on the ground, we're growing 4x month on month. Charts are all going up. We don't really bump up against stablecoin chain competition in the parts of the market we play. And so, like, what is the end state here? I think the end state is the buzzword goes away, the stablecoin chain buzzword goes away, and better language is used to describe these different companies who are actually doing very, very different things.
Well, Justin, do you want to respond to anything there about fragmentation?
Yeah. Yeah, I think fragmentation is a massive issue, and this all ties into the kind of economic critique that I made earlier, because and also the UX, right? Like, I think the two main reasons why I think Ethereum was so successful initially was one, due to programmability. That was a huge breakthrough. It really unleashed innovation, I think, on the cryptocurrency space. And number two was that you had a single composable state. And like that having that single composable state is incredibly valuable, because the network effects of that just compound, right? Because you could have, say, a stablecoin over here on that L1, and so you have a lending protocol over here, and you have, say, a exchange over here, and these can all kind of interact very quickly and seamlessly with each other. You lose that. You very much lose that atomic composability. You lose a lot of the seamless UX when you move over to this type of quote unquote L2 ecosystem. And I think that's a terrible trade-off to make. And I think it's incredibly confusing to users that you have, here in my wallet, I've got USDC on Optimism, and I've got USDC on Arbitrum, and I've got USDC on Codex. And if I want to move it from one to the other,
Justin,
I need to use a bridge. And then, but I can't use
if-
this bridge, and I need to take this security risk. I need to click on this, and I need to click on that.
think-
I need to
I think,
understand
like,
this. It's a
look,
nightmare
like,
compared to just scan
if-
QR code
if
send. That's
each-
how it's supposed to work.
Well, like, I bet the base guys are like, I don't know what Justin's talking about, because I bet I can do the scan QR code and pay.
Yeah, because they want everyone just to stay on their centralized L1.
I think
I'm not into that.
I'll steel man your argument. Right? Your argument is like, look, you have all these roll-ups who are kind of general and like doing everything, and like you're fragmenting the use space. I think there's some truth to that. Yeah, there's some truth to that. I think that's why I tell you the future of roll-ups cannot be that.
And
I think the future of roll-ups must be specialization. It must be
I can
specialization.
actually meet you halfway here. This is actually quite interesting that you say this, because I can meet you halfway, because I don't actually dislike L2s. Like, I'm not against L2s. I'm against the
you're a
L1
Codex
not
fan,
scaling.
Justin. I know that.
Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But I don't dislike L2s. I dislike that the L1 is scaling. So in my ideal future, all L2s are specialized, right? Because L2s are kind of providing these niches that actually would maybe make sense, that maybe the L1 can't provide, right? So like, I actually agree with that. But the problem with Ethereum, but the main problem with Ethereum is they said, no, L2s, we're outsourcing all execution and like everything to L2s, and that L2s are supposed to be this general purpose compute now.
Let's talk about
that was the big mistake. If only Ethereum scaled, then I'd be very happy with any L2, right? Like, that's not the issue.
Let's talk about the future, right? So I think we have common ground here, which is I think the future is specialized rollups. Rollups are extremely specialized in doing one specific thing. And I think in that configuration, I think Ethereum is unstoppable, because you have this sort of neutrality of Ethereum. You have the legitimacy.
It's extremely fragmented if the Ethereum can't do general purpose itself, right? Because now I transact over here, I lend over here, I exchange over there. That sounds terrible to me. That's not a good solution.
Justin, I think I think you exaggerate many of these difficulties. I think certainly the sort of where we agree.
Everyone can look at what I'm saying here.
I'm
literally not exaggerating, right?
Well,
like,
okay, I would be interested to hear, Justin. So, because like, it feels like when I listen to Haonan, what he's talking about is almost like this app chain, sort of like Cosmos-ish world.
Yeah.
So, Justin, in your ideal world, how would these issues be resolved?
Well, in my ideal world, which does exist on some blockchains, I suppose, it's the L1 scales.
Solana.
And actually, this is, my ideal world would basically be Ethereum pre-2022 maybe as well. Like, I was a big Ethereum fan as well, right? But back when I was a Solana critic and an Ethereum supporter, right? like Ethereum was the largest investment in my fund since like 2016 when we founded it, okay? So it's like, I do have that background, and I do have that like appreciation. So like, in my ideal world, That is what I'm talking about. If you're an application,
Justin,
build on the L1, you
have
can
you
be
s-
seamlessly composed. Let me just answer the question. Build on the
yeah,
L1, have a seamlessly composable system that is maximally secure, maximally decentralized, and maximally permissionless. Because
So,
I
but
actually
what
think
is
these trade-offs go
seamlessly
away.
composable? Explain what that looks like.
Yeah, so for example, if I have my wallet, my Phantom wallet, if I may, since Stripe hasn't released their wallet yet, or Stripe wallet, let's go with Stripe wallet to stick with the theme, okay? And then I say I want to swap. I want to swap an asset. So I click swap, and then a fraction of a second later, it's confirmed, it's finalized. I paid a fraction of a cent, and it's extremely reliable. Like that's how it works today, right? And I can do that across all use cases, pay a tiny fee without congestion with extreme reliability. That's what Ethereum is competing with. And it can't actually compete on the UX level. It can't compete on the level of security. It can't compete on the level of economics, as I've already covered. It can't compete on many levels. Yeah, sorry, I'll let you respond here.
But just to understand, so in your world, you think every single use case exists just on the L1, it's all interoperable and it will scale indefinitely without,
Well,
causing
because
issues?
because demand is not infinite, right? And we keep increasing capacity. So my belief is that we can actually demand will stay below capacity, and we just keep increasing capacity over time. As soon as we hit capacity, then we hit capacity, right? But I do think there's some room for L2s in my world. I will say, like I would say, even in my
I'm
ideal
glad
world,
to
there'll be
hear it.
some.
I'm glad to
Yeah,
hear it.
Are you
I
calling
want to
them network
believe
extensions?
you can call
We're
them whatever
we're
you want. But like
we're in the
basically,
concentration camp. Yeah.
yeah. No,
But so
I
so
expect
Justin,
Codex to
like,
move to
sorry.
Solana or Stripe one day. Here you go.
Let's talk about one aspect of this, which is, I think you're advancing this vision of like general purpose, right? Like
Yes,
a chain, it's general purpose, can do everything, it's gonna be fantastic.
yes, it can do
Um,
everything, and
have
that makes
you
it the
have
best.
you worked have you worked at one of these chain foundations that are attempting to do this?
I mean, I've been a full-time cryptocurrency for over a decade with a team of researchers.
Totally.
So
But have you been in
that's
one of these foundations before?
what do you mean by be inside exactly?
Oh, so like, I was in one of these foundations, right?
Mhm.
Where the mandate at the time was, look, we're going to do everything. We're going to do DeFi, do NFTs, something AI, something payments, something else. I was there. And I've spoken to colleagues in other analogous organizations, all the best, right? These are all I won't name specific names, but like any name like this is the dynamic. The dynamic is, when you try to focus on 20 things, you end up focusing on nothing at all. And when you try to focus 20 things, there are also trade-offs between these things,
Let
right?
me
Let me give
stop
you
you
one
here.
very
No. Let me just
wait.
okay. I'll
Justin,
give
I
you a
let you
round.
finish.
Okay,
You're
sure.
gonna have to let
No,
me
fair enough.
finish. You're gonna let me finish. Let me give you one very basic example, right? Where are there trade-offs across these use cases? Let's think about just one. The dominant product market fit in most chains today is DeFi, right? So what are the political dynamics inside each of these foundations for a DeFi guy? The DeFi guy is the big deal guy, right? Like this is the big deal guy. This is where the bread is buttered. And let's say until very recently, stablecoins, who cares, right? 2 years ago, nobody cares about stablecoins. There's a payments guy. Payments, the fuck, right? And like, what is it that these two guys want? What is a DeFi guy gold on? Probably TBL, likely, right? That's the measure of success, DeFi. And what is the metric that this payment guy might be trying to goal for? Like, I guess payment flows. What might be really good for payment flows? Well, one thing you could do is you could subsidize on-off ramps using your token. It is like a very obvious thing to do, right? Like if you sit down for 5 minutes and you think like, how might I help the stablecoin flows move more and faster? Let's pay that the on-off ramps are cheaper, so the transaction is cheaper. Let's say you're the payment guy, you take this to foundation. What do you think happens? What happens is they laugh you out of the room because the DeFi guy is like, have you lost your mind? You want me to pay tokens to move assets off the chain? Like, you're an idiot. Let's never talk about this again. And it dies. So there are these like very harsh trade-offs across use cases. And if you attempt to do everything, you will do nothing particularly well. And I think that's why you're seeing things trend the way that they do. But
this is somehow bullish for Solana, right, Justin?
If I may respond, yeah, no, because out of all the things you said, you're probably the most wrong about this particular point, because this whole idea that a core team needs to focus on lending or stable coins, that's BS. And I already told you why, because Ethereum's big innovation was programmability. All the core team needs to do is focus on scalability, decentralization, and latency, right? Like they just need to make the L1 blockchain. They just need to create as much fast, cheap, and decentralized block space as they can. They don't, hold on. They don't need to be distracted by all these use cases. So this argument is kind of nonsense because the core team should just be focused on making the L1 better. Part of the problem with Ethereum is that they are distracted with other things such as L2s. Like let private parties build L2s. They should focus on making the L1 better. That should be the mandate of any core development team, in my view. And that's part of where Ethereum really goes wrong.
You managed to mangle the L2 history as well as mangle like the existing dynamics in these chain foundations. Like,
I mean, don't just make the claim. Why am I mangling?
I'm about to justify it. Well, Justin, so is it your view that all the folks employed by the Solana Foundation currently working on stablecoins should be fired?
I don't understand this question, to be honest.
Well,
like,
you said that the L1 team should not be thinking about this stuff, right? Like Ethereum invented permissionlessness, and they don't need to think about any of this.
The Solana's team has been hyper focused on building out the L1. So yeah, I think that's great. Ethereum hasn't. Okay, like no, I don't know where you're going with it.
You're not answering the question, Justin.
Yeah, because Justin, you were saying they should only focus on.
Should some guy by the Ethereum Foundation who I don't understand his job and I don't know who he is and I don't know what he does.
We're not talking Ethereum Foundation. We're
Solana Foundation,
Solana.
right?
We're not talking.
Yeah. The Solana Foundation, yeah. You're asking me, should this random guy that I don't know, should he be fired?
Well, because you were saying. Yeah, you were saying so focus exclusively kind of on like technical scaling type stuff and not like the business applications. And so Hanan's just pointing out that the foundation does still also, employ people who are looking at like specific applications. And he's pointing out that
in terms of BD, he's
Justin,
correct.
Either you are an advocate.
In terms of BD, you're actually 100% correct. But I'm talking about developmental focus, right? Like that the developmental focus needs to be on the L1. So this idea that to have a generalized L1, that therefore the developers get too distracted, they have to do stablecoin DeFi, is simply not true because all they need to focus on is the blockchain block space itself.
I didn't make an engineering argument. There are certainly engineering arguments. I gave you one that's actually just focused on incentives, which is like the simplest one, right? I think the one that's least bullshitty and like everybody can evaluate for themselves whether it's real or not. I think, look, obviously I don't think you're advocating for mass firings at the Solana Foundation. So what I'm pushing you to like recognize is that the reality of running a chain is more than maybe the talking points you assert here. The reality of running a chain involves thinking through BD, thinking through who are the customers we want to face through.
Just so we don't miss each other, I was talking about development.
Justin,
you're talking about BD.
1 second.
Just clarify.
One second. Yeah. Of course. So I'm about to make that connection. So, like, how should tech be built? There ought to be a feedback loop, right? This is non-controversial, right? You have an idea. No matter how brilliant you are, the idea may not be correct. It has to be tested by the market. Try to sell it. If nobody wants it, give it up, try something else. And so you need to run this feedback loop, this product iteration feedback loop. That is very difficult to do if you're attempting to do it across 20 things. And many of these 20 things conflict with each other. And then there are the political dynamics on top of that. You should
do about BD, not development, right?
No, but what he's saying is that, you were saying they should just focus on the tech in a vacuum. And he's saying, if you're going to build something, you should talk to your users.
No, I think we're missing each other. No, we're missing each other a bit. Of course
she's right. That's what I mean.
I agree with that. That's why we're missing each other.
Okay,
I actually do agree with that.
Then we're good.
And that's why I like things like Solana that are more user-focused, right? That provide a better UX.
Okay. You guys, we're so far over time. And so now I'm going to give you literally 1 minute each to address just one other new trend that we're seeing that it fits in this space that I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on and how it fits in this argument that you guys are having. Obviously, this protocol native stablecoin thing is taken off. We obviously saw this huge competition about USDH, which that was bonkers in 5 million different ways. Mega ETH also announced its own. So this just adds to like the kind of fragmentation thing. And anyway, so I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on like why are we seeing this trend? Like, is it, do you feel like it fits in your position of like what you would say is a good thing, or do you think it's a bad thing? And Haonan, you go first. You have literally 1 minute, and Justin, you have 1 minute, and then we're going to wrap.
Shout out to Max. Congrats for winning. I'll see you in Singapore. I think the market's getting sorted out. I think, it's not clear where the power lies. And I think in different situations, the power accrues to a different layer. In the case of Hyperliquid, I think it's very clear that the power is accruing at the Hyperliquid level. And I think in different cases, this power is occurring in different ways. And you're seeing this kind of explosion of different variations of this game being played out. Chains are launching stables, some stables are a chain, like some wallets have a stable, PSPs might have a stable, PSP might have a chain. The roll-up guys are like trying to sell chains to PSPs.
Long term? Are we just going to have this huge number of like 5 million different stablecoins?
I think long term, a lot of this will get shaken out. And I think that long term, I'm talking my own book here. I think long term, the value accrues to the sort of dominant substrate where most of this stuff happens. And I think that substrate becomes the bonus.
So your 1 minute's up. Go ahead, Justin.
All right, sure. I mean, it's wonderful to see all this competition. I will just say, I mean, I haven't followed the whole hype thing that closely, but it very much seemed like very much an insider choice that they chose native markets over Paxos. But that's just my offhand opinion here. It just seems like Paxos had
It's actually not only your opinion, but anyway.
Yeah, I've noticed. Yeah. So to me, that was a little bit wild. And it's kind of that example of like decentralization theater a little bit. Like, yeah, sure, they had a vote, but in reality, they're all buddies and they're just voting for their buddy, right? Like, let's be honest here. Which is fine, I suppose. I mean, it's their right to vote the way they want to.
But so do you think that's the future for every chain to have their own stablecoin and we just have this plethora of stablecoins? Like, do you think this is a good trend or a bad trend?
I mean, if you're asking me either or, I would say good trend because I like free markets and I like innovation. I think I also agree that eventually this gets shaken out because like, the liquidity tends to concentrate around a few, but I think we're now during a bit of an explosion of new stable coins, and that's great. I think let the best products win. And Tim, you also mentioned, by the way, putting a stable coin like natively in the L1, or is that misunderstood? Oh, you think you're referring more to the hype thing there, right? Yeah. So yeah, I do think there are some dangers there if you implement it that way. But like I do, right. But I do think like the that it was a decentralized vote, or at least I know it was very concentrated. But I do think that's at least a very like good thing, and I think we need to do more of that in this space because I think giving stakeholders a voice is actually I think that's really what this movement should also be more about. Because if it's all closed room decisions, then like the whole chain kind of becomes a farce in a way.
Yeah. All right, you guys, this was very fun. It was wild. It was a really good debate. There were good points made on both sides. So thanks to everybody for joining us to learn more about stablecoins, alt L1s, L2s. You can check the show notes at the time. And until then, thanks everyone, and we will catch you all later. Thanks for tuning in to the weekly news recap. Let's begin. SEC approves faster path for crypto ETFs. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission has approved new generic listing standards that will streamline the approval process for cryptocurrency exchange-traded funds. The change allows asset managers to launch products more quickly if the underlying crypto has regulated futures trading for at least 6 months or trades on an exchange within the Intermarket Surveillance Group, which monitors for market manipulation. SEC Chairman Paul Atkins said, "This approval helps to maximize investor choice and foster innovation by streamlining the listing process and reducing barriers." The rule, approved by the NYSE, NASDAQ, and CBOE, reduces the maximum approval timeline from 240 days to as few as 75. Baseway's native token launch. The Coinbase-backed Ethereum Layer 2 is exploring the creation of a native network token after reaching key growth milestones. At the Basecamp 2025 summit, head of ecosystem Jesse Pollack said, "We're in the early phases of exploration and don't have any specifics to share around timing, design, or governance." Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong added that a token could be a great tool for decentralization and expanding opportunities for developers. The announcement marks a shift from last year, when Base dismissed the idea of token issuance. The network now reports nearly 1 million daily active addresses and more than $5 billion in total value locked, second only to Arbitrum. Speaking on Unchained, analyst Ryan Yee said, "Conservatively, I think it could come out at a $20 billion FDV and probably run to 40 or 50, noting the potential for acquisitions and growth campaigns fueled by token resources." Native Markets wins bid to issue Hyperliquid's stablecoin. Native Markets has been selected to launch Hyperliquid's first native stablecoin, USDH, following a high-profile bidding contest that drew proposals from major players, including Paxos, BitGo, Frax, and Athena. The team secured a 2/3 supermajority of staked Hype tokens, Hyperliquid's governance asset, and will begin a test phase for USDH minting and redemptions within days, according to co-founder Max Feige. The stablecoin will be issued on Hyperliquid's Hyper EVM network, with reserves backed by cash and U.S. Treasuries. Management will be split between BlackRock for off-chain assets and Superstate for on-chain reserves, with yield directed toward Hype buybacks and distribution growth. Kalshi partners with Solana and Base as prediction markets chase billions. Prediction platform Kalshi is joining forces with Solana and Coinbase's Base network to launch a new ecosystem hub aimed at funding builders, traders, and creators through grants. "We're backing off-chain and on-chain innovation," the company wrote on X, promoting the initiative as trading volumes climb closer to rival Polymarket. Kalshi recorded $875 million in August, compared to Polymarket's $1 billion, according to the block. At the same time, both platforms are drawing investor attention. Reports suggest Polymarket is weighing fresh financing that could value the company at $9 to $10 billion, a sharp increase from the $1 billion valuation it secured earlier this year. Kalshi, backed by Paradigm, is also said to be close to raising funds at a $5 billion valuation, more than double its level from a few months ago. With the CFTC recently clearing Polymarket to relaunch in the U.S., competition in prediction markets is intensifying. Binance in talks to end DOJ. Compliance monitor early. Binance is reportedly negotiating with the U.S. Department of Justice to end the 3-year independent compliance monitor imposed under its $4.3 billion settlement agreement, according to people familiar with the talks. The monitor, run by Forensic Risk Alliance, was required after Binance admitted to violations of anti-money laundering rules and the Bank Secrecy Act in 2023. If approved, the deal would ease federal oversight of the world's largest crypto exchange, though Binance would still need to adopt stricter reporting requirements and remains subject to a separate monitor from the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. The DOJ has recently ended monitorships for several companies as part of a broader review of the practice. News of the potential change sent Binance's BNB token to a record high of over $1,000. Former CEO Changpeng CZ Zhao also updated his X profile to read simply Binance, removing the label X Binance. Circle expands to Hyperliquid. Circle has launched a native version of its USDC stablecoin on the decentralized exchange Hyperliquid. The rollout includes Circle's upgraded cross-chain transfer protocol on Hyperliquid's Hyper EVM, aimed at making USDC transfers more efficient across multiple blockchains. Alongside the launch, Circle confirmed an investment in Hyperliquid's native Hype token, with on-chain data showing a $4.6 million purchase. The company is also weighing a role as a validator on the network. Circle wrote on X, "This launch is the first step toward enabling USDC deposits into Hyperliquid's spot and perpetuals exchange on Hypercore. If the platform shifts its $5.9 billion in USDC collateral into USDH, Circle could see a reduction of roughly $200 million in annual reserve income." Ethereum Foundation creates AI team. The Ethereum Foundation has launched a new artificial intelligence unit, known as the DAI team, to integrate AI with decentralized infrastructure. Led by Ethereum researcher Devi DeCrapis, the group aims to position Ethereum as the settlement and coordination layer for autonomous agents that can transact and cooperate without intermediaries. A key focus will be advancing ERC 8004, a proposed standard that would allow AI agents to verify identity and reputation on-chain, giving users more transparency when interacting with bots. Krapis said, "The more intelligent agents transact, the more they need a neutral base layer for value and reputation." In related news, Google unveiled a new AI-to-AI payment system that includes stablecoin support, developed in partnership with Coinbase and over 60 other firms, to power seamless transactions between autonomous digital agents. Monero hit by 18-block reorg. The privacy-focused blockchain suffered an unusual network disruption on September 14th, when 18 recently processed blocks of transactions were replaced by a competing chain. The incident effectively erased more than 100 transactions and left them unconfirmed for about 40 minutes. Reorganizations, or reorgs, happen when two versions of a blockchain compete, and the network switches to the longer chain. This can undo payments that users thought were final, raising the risk of double spending. Monero researchers advised users to wait longer than the usual 10 confirmations before treating transactions as secure. Some community members accused the mining group Cubic of exploiting the system with a tactic called selfish mining, but its founder denied responsibility. Unchained is produced by Laura Shin, with help from Matt Pilchard, Juan Aranovich, Margaret Curia, and Pam Majumdar. The weekly recap was written by Juan Aranovich and edited by Stephen Ehrlich. Thanks for listening.